Pa, I didn't wake up one day knowing something was wrong. There was no sudden fear, no obvious warning. It began as a quiet feeling that stayed with me longer than it should have. A sense that something around me had shifted, even though everything looked the same. The house was familiar. The routines were unchanged. The conversations sounded normal. And yet, something felt slightly out of place, like a room that had been rearranged while you were asleep. At first, I ignored it. I told myself that not every discomfort needs an explanation, that relationships come with compromises, that trust means choosing belief over suspicion. I learned, like many people do, that doubting someone you love is dangerous, that it can damage something precious if you question it too much. So I stayed quiet. I stayed polite with my own instincts, but the feeling didn't disappear. It lingered in small pauses, in moments when I stopped myself from thinking freely, in the strange hesitation I felt before sending a message or making a plan. I couldn't explain why I suddenly felt observed, not watched in a physical sense, but noticed in a way that felt too precise. Intuition rarely arrives with proof. It arrives as discomfort. Started with a joke, a tiny jab at something I wore. I laughed it off. Who wouldn't? It was just a joke. Then it was a comment about my friends. They're a bit much, don't you think? I started seeing them a little less, just to keep the peace. It wasn't a big deal. Small concessions, right? That's what relationships are all about. The suggestions came next. That top isn't very flattering on you. Or, maybe you shouldn't talk so much at parties. You come off a little strong. I found myself standing in front of my closet, second-guessing everything. I'd rehearse conversations in my head, trying to sand down my edges. To be softer, quieter, easier. I was just trying to be a better partner. I remember one evening, I got a promotion at work. I was ecstatic, bursting to share the news. But the reaction wasn't excitement. It was a flat, so you'll be even busier now. The joy just deflated, like a balloon. My world started shrinking. Little by little, my victories became reasons for conflict. My opinions became arguments waiting to happen. The silence was easier. Agreeing was easier. One day, I looked in the mirror and I didn't recognize the person staring back. Where was the girl who loved bright colors, who laughed loudly, who wasn't afraid to speak her mind? She had been chipped away, piece by piece, so slowly I didn't even notice she was gone. The bigger walls aren't built with bricks. They're built with quiet criticisms, with small dismissals, with love that feels like a cage. Recognizing the bars is the first step to finding the key. It's a quiet, difficult journey back to yourself, but it's the most important one you'll ever take. If this story feels familiar, please know you are not alone, and help is available. Holiday. Reaching out is a sign of incredible strength. Thank you for listening. Holiday. Have you ever had that nagging feeling in your gut? A quiet little voice trying to tell you something is off, but you push it aside. I know I have. And I've learned there's a heavy price to pay for ignoring your intuition. It's not a sudden, dramatic cost, but a debt paid quietly, over a long, slow period of time. It started subtly. I began to doubt myself more than I doubted the actual situation. Whenever a sense of discomfort would bubble up, my first instinct wasn't to question the circumstances, but to question my own sensitivity. Am I just overthinking this? Am I being too dramatic? Maybe I'm just imagining things that aren't even real. Over and over, I learned to silence my own questions before they could even fully form. And that's how your sense of trust gets twisted. Trust is supposed to be this mutual, safe space. But for me, it became something I had to protect at all costs, even if the cost was my own clarity. I convinced myself that asking questions would only create problems, that voicing my discomfort would just cause unnecessary tension. I chose a false sense of peace over the difficult truth. But here's the thing about peace that's built on silence: it's incredibly fragile. While everything looked calm on the surface, inside, I was slowly unraveling. I felt less and less present in my own life. I felt ungrounded, uncertain. The lines of my personal boundaries started to blur, and I couldn't tell where I ended and someone else began. And when you lose that clarity about your own boundaries, you start to feel like your life isn't fully yours anymore. It's like you're a passenger in your own story. But still, I stayed. Still, I waited. Still, I just kept hoping that uneasy feeling would eventually pass. It was a long and painful lesson, but it taught me that your intuition isn't just a feeling. It's your deepest form of self-preservation. It's the truest compass you'll ever have. Ignoring it means you're not just ignoring a feeling, you're ignoring yourself. So, if you're feeling that little nudge, that quiet warning, please listen to it. It's trying to keep you safe. It's trying to lead you back to you. Take care. Eventually, patterns reveal themselves. It wasn't one event that changed everything. It was repetition. The same awareness appearing again and again, refusing to be dismissed. A growing realization that my private moments weren't entirely private, that my choices were being tracked emotionally, even if not physically. Then came the moment of confirmation. Not dramatic, not explosive, just undeniable. The realization didn't bring panic, it brought stillness. The kind of stillness that comes when confusion finally ends, when all the small moments align into one clear understanding. I wasn't being protected, I was being monitored. And the hardest part wasn't what had been done, it was how long I had convinced myself it was normal. Trust didn't shatter in that moment. It softened, then collapsed. I felt grief, not just for the relationship, but for the version of myself that had ignored discomfort for the sake of harmony. For the time I spent minimizing feelings that deserved attention, for the energy I gave to explaining away things that didn't feel right. Being watched changes something fundamental. It changes how you move through your own life, how you think, how you exist, and once you notice that change, you can't undo it. The realization wasn't about blame, it was about awareness. Love should make you feel free inside yourself, not cautious, not careful, not measured. Leaving wasn't immediate. There was a quiet period where everything slowed down, where I reflected more than I reacted, where I allowed myself to feel what I had postponed feeling for too long. There was sadness, yes, but there was also relief, the kind that arrives when truth replaces confusion, too. I understood then that walking away doesn't always mean walking into something better right away. Sometimes it just means walking back to yourself. The decision wasn't dramatic, it was calm. And that calm told me everything I needed to know. What stayed with me wasn't anger, it was clarity. I learned that love never needs constant access to your thoughts. That trust doesn't demand proof of innocence. That care never requires control. And that intuition is not paranoia, it is information delivered softly. I learned that boundaries are not punishments, they are protection. And that honoring them early is far kinder than explaining their absence later. Most of all, I learned this: if something feels wrong quietly, it is usually right loudly, once you finally listen. If you're listening to this and something feels familiar, pause. Not to panic, but to notice. Discomfort doesn't always mean danger, but it always means attention is needed. You don't owe anyone access to your inner world. You don't need permission to protect your peace, and you don't have to wait for proof to honor your feelings. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is trust yourself, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially then. I didn't lose trust that day. I reclaimed awareness. And awareness once gained never leaves quietly. It stays with you, guides you, protects you, and reminds you that peace begins the moment you stop explaining away what your heart already understands.